Clara pushed her shopping cart slowly through the supermarket aisles, her eyes darting between the items on the shelves and the list in her hand. Every product she added was carefully calculated in her mind. What used to be a simple grocery run had become a test of resilience, especially since the passing of her husband 2 years ago. Raising 3 young children alone was no easy feat, but Clara's determination was steadfast. She did everything she could to ensure her family lacked nothing essential. As she moved through the store, a mix of anxiety and hope swirled in her chest. The hurried, indifferent faces of other shoppers blurred past her as she stopped to adjust the cart's handle and glanced at a shelf filled with cookies her children adored. With a sigh, she reached for a small package, knowing it would be a rare treat for them. She couldn't afford extravagance, but she believed in little joys amidst hardships. With her cart now full, Clara made her way to the checkout line, trying to keep her head high despite the tight feeling in her chest. She reassured herself that she had calculated her budget well. The growing line behind her added to her tension, the impatient whispers mingling with the rhythmic beep of the scanner. "Stay calm," she whispered, pushing her worries aside as the cashier scanned her items. The cashier announced the total, and Clara's heart sank. Despite her careful math, she was a few dollars short. A warm flush crept up her neck as she fumbled through her purse, fingers scraping for coins that weren't there. The murmurs behind her grew louder, and someone sighed dramatically. Trembling, she began to pick out items to set aside, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. The cashier, a young woman with a sharp expression, exhaled impatiently. "You're holding up the line," she muttered, her tone sharp enough to slice through Clara's remaining composure. The shame was suffocating. For a moment, Clara considered abandoning everything and running out, away from the judgmental eyes. But then, a voice cut through the tension. A soft rustle caught Clara's attention. An elderly man, with kind eyes and a gentle presence, stepped forward and placed a bill on the counter. Without a word, he paid the difference. The cashier's face softened for just a moment before resuming its indifference. "Next," she said, waving Clara on as if the moment had already passed. Clara looked at the man, her gratitude tangible. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The old man smiled, a smile that carried stories untold. "We all need a little help sometimes," he said warmly, giving her a slight nod before turning back to his spot in line. As Clara hurriedly packed her groceries, still processing the unexpected act of kindness, she noticed the cashier shooting a disapproving glance. It was as if the man's simple gesture had unsettled something in her. Clara left the store with heavy bags and a heavier heart, wondering who this stranger was who had restored a piece of her faith in humanity. Back at home, Clara prepared dinner with her mind replaying the scene at the supermarket. Her children, eyes wide with excitement at the sight of the rare treat, laughed and played, unaware of their mother's internal turmoil. After tucking them into bed, she sat in her worn armchair and contemplated how she could express her gratitude. She promised herself she would repay the stranger's kindness, no matter what. A few days later, Clara returned to the supermarket, a homemade loaf of bread in hand as a token of her thanks. She asked the employees if they knew the man who had helped her, but most shrugged until one finally said, "Oh, you must mean Mr. Samuel. He comes by occasionally. He's the owner of the store." Clara was stunned. The man who had quietly paid for her groceries wasn't just any customer, he was the owner. Clara stood in stunned silence, the bread in her hands feeling heavier than before. The idea that Mr. Samuel, the owner of the very store she frequented, had stepped in to help her without a second thought left her reeling. She recalled his warm smile and the gentle way he had said, We all need a little help sometimes." The image of that moment stayed with her as she turned and left the store. That evening, Clara shared the story with her eldest daughter, Ava, who listened with wide eyes. "So, he's the owner?" Ava whispered in awe. Clara nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Yes, and he showed me that kindness doesn't always come from where we expect it. But it's our job to pass it on." The conversation settled in Clara's heart as she prepared for bed, her resolve growing stronger. The next morning, Clara dressed carefully, wrapping the loaf of bread in a cloth embroidered by her late mother. She returned to the supermarket and asked to see Mr. Samuel. The employees exchanged glances but eventually agreed. Clara waited near the entrance, nervously clutching the gift. When Mr. Samuel appeared, his eyes lit up with recognition. "Mrs. Clara, isn't it?" he said, his voice as kind as she remembered. She nodded, holding out the bread. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did the other day. I know it's not much, but this is something special from my kitchen." Samuel's eyes softened as he accepted the gift. "You didn't have to do this, but I appreciate it. Acts of kindness, no matter how small, make life worth living." They sat at a small table near the store's cafe, and Samuel shared a story from his youth. He spoke of growing up in a modest household where his mother taught him the importance of giving, even when they had little to share. Clara listened intently, moved by the parallels between their lives. She spoke of her husband's sudden passing and the struggles that followed, which Samuel listened to with quiet empathy. "I know what it means to have nothing and still be expected to move forward," he said finally. Clara felt a connection form, one not just of gratitude, but of mutual understanding. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Days passed, and Clara returned to her usual routine, though with a renewed spirit. One afternoon, she received a call from the supermarket asking her to come by. Confused but curious, Clara arrived to find Mr. Samuel waiting. "Clara," he began, "I've been thinking about what you shared. I want to offer you a part-time position here. It may not be much, but it's a step." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. The offer was more than just a job, it was a chance to rebuild her life. "I would be honored," she whispered, barely containing her emotion. Clara's first day at the supermarket was a mix of nerves and excitement. She was assigned to help with stocking shelves and organizing displays. Some employees, remembering the scene at the register, watched her with a mix of curiosity and quiet judgment. But Clara kept her head high, fueled by the support she had from Samuel. As days turned into weeks, she worked hard to prove herself, showing diligence and kindness to those around her. Despite whispers and sideways glances from some colleagues, Clara's genuine nature began to soften even the toughest hearts. One afternoon, the cashier who had once treated Clara dismissively approached her during a break. "Hey, Clara," she began awkwardly, looking at the ground. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how I acted that day. I shouldn't have been so rude." Clara's surprise was evident, but she smiled warmly. "Thank you for saying that. We all have tough days." The cashier's tense posture relaxed, and for the first time, there was a mutual understanding between them. It was a small step, but an important one. Samuel, observing Clara's progress, decided to give her more responsibility. "Clara, how would you feel about training as a customer service assistant?" he asked one day. Clara's eyes widened with surprise and delight. "I would love that," she said, her voice steady with newfound confidence. The opportunity was both thrilling and daunting, but Clara embraced it. Clara's training began the next day. She shadowed one of the senior customer service assistants, learning the intricacies of handling customer concerns, processing returns, and ensuring satisfaction. It was challenging at first, but Clara's warm demeanor and keen attention to detail set her apart. Her willingness to go above and beyond for customers started to draw attention. Soon, even the employees who once viewed her with skepticism began to acknowledge her efforts. The cashier who had once looked down on her offered tips and advice. Clara's progress didn't go unnoticed by Samuel, who watched from a distance with a proud smile. "You're making a real difference, Clara," he said one day after observing her assist an elderly customer with patience and kindness. Word of Clara's dedication began to spread within the community. Regular shoppers noticed her helpful nature and would specifically seek her out for assistance. One day, a mother with 2 young children approached her. "I heard from a friend that you're the most helpful person here. My little one lost her favorite toy. Could you help us find it?" Clara smiled and, after a short search, reunited the tearful child with her beloved stuffed bear. The moment solidified her role as more than just an employee. She was becoming a beacon of reliability and warmth, just as Samuel had once been in his younger days. The community felt the difference, and Clara felt a growing sense of purpose. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Samuel invited Clara to join him for tea in the small office at the back of the store. The walls were lined with photos of community events, charity drives, and happy moments with employees. Samuel pointed to a picture of a much younger version of himself, handing out food baskets during a tough winter decades ago. "I started this store not just as a business, but as a way to give back," Samuel shared, his voice deep with memory. "My mother taught me that when you lift others, you lift yourself." Clara listened, her heart swelling with admiration. She realized that Samuel's act of kindness towards her was not an isolated event but part of who he was, a man dedicated to uplifting others. Despite the positivity, Clara's journey wasn't without obstacles. One day, an unexpected problem arose. A new competitor, a flashy supermarket chain, opened nearby with aggressive pricing and flashy promotions. It drew away some of Samuel's longtime customers, threatening the stability of his store. Samuel, though calm on the outside, wore a shadow of concern in his eyes that only Clara noticed. Clara felt a deep sense of loyalty stir within her. The store wasn't just a place of employment for her, it was the cradle of her second chance. Determined to help, she brainstormed ways to attract customers back. "Mr. Samuel, what if we held community days? Events where we offer small workshops, fun activities for children, and showcase local products?" Samuel's eyes brightened. "That's exactly the kind of idea we need, Clara." Clara and the team worked tirelessly to set up the first community day. Flyers were distributed, and word spread through social media. The employees who had once doubted her were now working side by side, fueled by her enthusiasm. Samuel watched the preparations with pride, seeing how Clara's energy reinvigorated the staff. The day of the event arrived, and the supermarket was transformed. Booths lined the aisles, offering local crafts, homemade treats, and games for children. The turnout exceeded their expectations. Parents chatted while their kids played, and local vendors found new customers. Clara moved among them, making sure everything went smoothly, her heart full of hope. In the middle of the bustling crowd, a familiar face appeared, an elderly woman Clara recognized from church. She approached Clara with a warm hug. "I came to see what all the excitement was about, and I have to say, you've brought the spirit back to this store," she said with a knowing smile. The praise warmed Clara's heart, but the real surprise came when Samuel took the microphone. I want to thank everyone for being here today, Samuel began. But more importantly, I want to recognize someone who has shown what it means to lift others. He gestured to Clara, whose cheeks flushed. Clara reminded me why I started this store, to build community, not just sell goods. The cashier, who once mocked Clara's struggle, approached her after the event. Her expression was sincere, and her voice carried none of the previous harshness. Clara, I need to say this, I was wrong about you. You've shown us all what true strength looks like. I'm sorry for judging you. Clara's eyes shimmered with emotion. Thank you, that means more than you know, she replied. The two women exchanged a smile, the weight of past misunderstandings lifted. The weeks following the community event saw an uptick in business. Old customers returned, and new faces appeared, curious about the store that everyone was talking about. Yet, amidst the success, Samuel's health began to wane. He called Clara into his office one day, his expression serious but warm. I'm not as strong as I used to be, Clara, he admitted, his voice tinged with fatigue. I need to start thinking about the future of this place. Clara felt a knot tighten in her chest as Samuel spoke. The idea of the store without him seemed unimaginable. But Samuel's eyes were clear, filled with both weariness and trust. Clara, you've proven not just your ability but your heart. I want you to take on more leadership here, to help guide this store as it continues to grow, he said, his voice soft but resolute. Clara's eyes widened, and she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. I don't know what to say, Mr. Samuel. I'm honored, she finally replied. He smiled, the deep lines of his face softening. So you'll keep this place alive with the same kindness and strength you've shown since day one. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she nodded, realizing that this was more than a job, it was now her calling. Clara's new role came with its challenges. She was tasked with overseeing staff, managing supplies, and ensuring that the community days continued to thrive. Some employees were surprised by the rapid changes, and whispers of doubt occasionally surfaced. Clara, however, kept pushing forward, drawing strength from Samuel's faith in her and the memories of the struggles she had overcome. There were days when the stress threatened to overwhelm her, but she would pause, close her eyes, and remember her children's laughter, the warm smile Samuel gave her, and the kindness that had started it all. Each memory anchored her, turning moments of doubt into determination. With time, her leadership began to inspire others, and the store felt alive with a renewed sense of purpose. Just as things seemed to be stabilizing, an unexpected storm swept through the area one evening. The heavy rain and wind damaged parts of the store's roof and flooded the storage room. Clara arrived early the next morning to find employees standing outside, murmuring with concern. Samuel, despite his health, was already there, leaning on his cane with a determined look. We'll get through this, Clara said, taking a deep breath as she surveyed the damage. She coordinated with the staff to start cleaning and salvaging what they could. As they worked together, the camaraderie that had been building over months solidified into a fierce resolve. Even customers who had heard about the storm came by, offering help and support. Word of the damage spread quickly, and soon, neighbors began showing up with supplies and extra hands to help. Clara was touched by the outpouring of support, proof that Samuel's vision of community had taken root. She worked alongside volunteers, organizing tasks and making sure everyone stayed safe. The store transformed into a scene of unity and resilience, with laughter mingling with the sounds of hammers and sweeping brooms. Amid the chaos, Samuel watched with a look of deep pride. You've brought them together, Clara, he said quietly when she paused to check on him. His voice faltered, and he reached for her hand. "You're not just leading this store, you're leading a community." The repairs were completed within days, thanks to the collective efforts of the community. Clara stood in the newly restored store, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. Samuel called everyone together for a small reopening ceremony where he announced his semi-retirement. "I'll still be here," he said, his eyes twinkling, "but Clara will be leading the day-to-day operations." The applause was thunderous, and Clara felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The store was not only back to normal, it was stronger, more vibrant. Customers stayed longer, chatting with staff and browsing the displays with renewed interest. The store had become more than just a business, it was a gathering place. One afternoon, as Clara was helping a customer, she noticed a familiar face at the door, a man who had been a distant memory. His name was David, a childhood friend who had moved away years ago. They hadn't spoken since their teenage years, but here he was, smiling as if no time had passed. "Clara," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I heard about the community days and had to come see it for myself." They shared stories over coffee in the small cafe area of the store. David, now an entrepreneur, was impressed by Clara's journey and the store's role in the community. "I'd love to help with your next event," he said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. Clara felt a renewed sense of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something even greater. With David's input, Clara began planning new community programs, job fairs, local talent showcases, and workshops for young entrepreneurs. Samuel, now enjoying his slower pace, watched with admiration as Clara and her team expanded the store's vision. The business grew not just in profit, but in heart, and the customers noticed. One day, as Clara reviewed plans for a charity event, Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "This was always meant to be more than a store, and you've made it so," he said, his eyes glistening with emotion. Clara squeezed his hand in response, understanding that they were no longer just co-workers but partners in carrying out a shared dream. Clara's efforts began to inspire other local businesses, sparking a trend of community-focused initiatives throughout the town. One morning, a customer approached her, tears in her eyes. "Your kindness here saved my family during hard times. I want you to know that it makes a difference," she said. Clara was speechless, feeling the full weight of what Samuel had taught her. That night, as she closed up the store, Clara stood by a mural dedicated to Samuel, which depicted him smiling with the words, "Small acts, great change." It served as a reminder of how a single act of compassion could ripple through countless lives. Years later, Clara stood at the front of the store, now bustling with energy and laughter. Samuel, though retired, visited often, his smile as wide as ever. The store had become a testament to resilience, love, and community, a place where people felt seen and supported. Clara's children, now older, helped run events and workshops, continuing the cycle of kindness. As she watched them, she whispered a silent promise to herself, to keep nurturing the legacy that had been handed down to her. The future was bright, and Clara knew that as long as compassion guided her, the store would remain a beacon of hope.